Well, hey folks, it's your old pal King Waspinator. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. Every once in a while, I've mentioned that during my 20s, I kind of dropped out of the role-playing game hobby and kind of nerddom in general as a result of the events of going to a Magic the Gathering tournament in South Austin at a comic shop when I was either like late 19 or early 20. It was still in the 90s, the late 90s. Dun dun dun. Before we had social media, before everyone had easy internet access, and cheap computers, and all that kind of stuff. We were still living in a more of an unplugged and analog world back then. And I would notice that occasionally there'd be comments of like, oh, what happened? What went on there that caused this? And I generally don't bring it up because in many ways, like, I don't know, the few times I have tried to discuss it, it's kind of like all part of a story about, the long-term problems with quote-unquote the fan community, nerds in general. I mean, in that particular instance, like it all sprung off because of the attitudes of a bunch of Magic the Gathering nerds, but, we're all just little tiny individual cells of a greater phenomenon of nerddom, regardless of what genres we might individually like. So basically, the gist is, just went to a tournament. I had built up a decent white-green deck. Did fairly well most of the time against most of my friends who I played Magic the Gathering with, just in private. Just having fun with the friends, hanging around, kind of shit, roommates. Got talked into entering this tournament. So I did. Never had done anything like that. I didn't do that terribly bad. I didn't do like terribly great, but it's not like I was immediately washed out. For however many rounds it was of elimination by elimination to get up the pyramid, I made it somewhere around halfway through. I mean, I was there like a good hour and a half before I finally got tapped out. And did all right. In the end, it was a dude who it was just around the time the Slivers stuff had just come out, and so finally ran into a dude who had some of those in his deck, and it was just immediately overrun. Like, it was in many ways doing the exact same tactic that my deck was designed for, which was basically you have the white magic for all your protection kind of stuff, and then you have the green magic for the ability to like generate small minions really quickly once you get everything out in play, and you can pump some mana into it. Suddenly you got a bunch of little tiny twig dudes or whatever the hell it was. And basically, like with the Slivers, the dude was able to basically do the same thing of just like generate a small army of minions that, even though they're all individually little weak creatures, they just like completely just overwhelm you and just take down your hit points. It's been a long time since I've played Magic, obviously. And oddly, like, that guy was probably, like the only guy who behaved well. He seemed kind of, like, sad. Like, this has been happening over and over again. He's feeling bad about, like, on some level about just, like, taking everyone out so easily with the Slivers deck. Maybe it feels a little bit like it's cheap or cheating because it's too easy. I don't know. He seemed sorry and like genuinely like sorry for winning, which was, weird. But after going home, just thinking back on the entire evening, the thing is like, you don't just immediately get eliminated like just for losing one round. You got whatever the equation was. Like I said, this is like 25 years ago now, somewhere thereabouts, and it's just it was the way everyone acted. The winners were poor winners, and the losers were exceptionally poor losers. God, I had one guy like try to call over one of the referees to accuse me of cheating because I had, like I said, it was a white-green deck. I put 2 of each protection spell for every color mixed in. Yes, knowing that that eats up a little chunk of whatever the 50 some odd cards you were allowed to have for the tournament. But, I like just having coverage, and you never know what you're going to go up against, and the whole point of having the white-green thing is for the protection. And so, I went ahead and invested having that many cards, like at least, 10 cards out of that deck being devoted just to protection circles. And real early on, I went up against a guy who had an all-black deck, and just by twist of fate, I got lucky and managed to get one of the protection against black in my very opening hand. And as soon as I played that, he like, this is bullshit. And referee comes over and I show him my card list, and I'm like, you know, I mean, he watched me shuffle. Like there's nothing, you know, it's summer in Austin. It's not like I had sleeves on or anywhere to like hide cards or anything like that. You know, I'm a little bit of a klutz, so I'm not exactly the best candidate for doing that kind of like card shark kind of stuff. And like the people who'd win would like just be like all like, yeah, fuck you. It's like way like just over the top. Like, I don't know. It was just, it was all I can really say. It's like hard to like really, I guess, describe it properly after so many years, but it was so distasteful of a display that it like just kind of made me think just through all the years of high school and such of like hanging out with Star Trek nerds and other gaming nerds and you know, hanging out with live action vampire LARPers up in Boulder, Colorado during my senior year, and like the bad behavior I had witnessed, the bad behavior I had myself engaged in, the whole thing, and all the stupid arguing. I once tried to write a letter about this into Robert Meyer Burnett's show a couple years ago now, back before all the pandemic crap started. And, you know, just describing all this is just kind of like, you know, I know like we want to like try to make this thing out like it's some new thing that the fandom's all split apart, but it's not. Like long before the internet and social media came around, we already were a bunch of like sensitive, argumentative, petty people in many cases. Obviously not everybody, but you know, you can't, you know, have asterisks and list out all the exceptions for really large categories of things. But yes, I'm mainly just speaking out a general trend that exists within fandom. But it's always colored it. It's always been just like in large, especially with role-playing games, like in large part because like, you know, it's not universal, but so many of us back then were like social outcast types. That leads to a lot of real just like resentful, bitter people who like are, you know, real easy to just activate by pressing their buttons, kind of a thing, you know. And, you know, it was, like, I don't know, 5 years later or so, like, you know, after that, I just, like, I sold all my books to half-price books, and, like, pretty much, I even stopped watching Star Trek. I mean, I basically just kind of switched over to just, like, smoking weed and listening to music. I got a night shift job that I stayed at for a long time. So maybe 5 or 6 years later, when the Spike TV cable network came out, they started showing, they just like started up as the cable network, and they're, you know, like relying on old Star Trek reruns to get viewers. And, you know, being that I work night shift and there's not a whole lot of good television to be found at like, you know, 9 in the morning, especially back before you had stuff like DVRs even, you're still like kind of stuck watching whatever just happened to be on. I kind of just like reluctantly at first got back into watching Star Trek. And like slowly kind of like, you know, like allowed myself, like the Star Wars movies were always a bit of an exception. Like, you know, I just had kind of made of a vow to like always make a point to go see a Star Wars movie if it's in a theater. Which I held up until Solo. And it wasn't because I was that pissed off about The Last Jedi that I was going to boycott Solo. It was because it was too quick of a jump. Like 6 months apart between major theatrical releases of a certain series just doesn't feel like enough time for me to be all that excited about having to like go out and pay all that money to go sit in a theater. Like maybe I'm just because of the conditioning of my own childhood when we lived in an age where it can be like a year before you'd even get to see a movie on video after its theatrical release. Like nowadays, there's such a quick turnover. It's like I can just wait 2 months and watch it on Disney Plus anyway, kind of a thing, you know, and not have to go anywhere. So that, you know, Star Wars was like the one exception, but you know, Star Trek opened the crack, and then of all things, it was D&D 4th edition that finally got me to get back into role-playing games. when 4th edition first came out, they had these great little ads that were on YouTube that would pop up when I'd watch a video or whatever, where it was like this nice like graph paper animated aesthetic. It was real nostalgic, very much leaned in towards like, oh, I remember the good old days of D&D kind of a thing going on. And so I ended up picking up the 4th edition books, and like the miniatures rules were like much more prominent. So I had got whatever battle grid maps and cutout pieces thing they were selling in a box set, and got my sister and some of her friends to volunteer to play just to test it out. And man, I just like really found the 4th edition experience lacking, because it did not match my memories of how old role-playing games were when you were just talking everything through, and it was too wedded to its minis rules. But it was enough to have gotten me back enough into the hobby that I went out and found that Palladium was still operating and you could still get riffs and stuff I was at least a little familiar with, and started recollecting that stuff, and on, and here we are, like, what, 10 years later. I was excited when 5th edition came out, just to see, like, oh, a D&D that, like, actually has role-playing in it again. Around the time that I had left off D&D was, like, and role-playing in general, after the Magic the Gathering tournament, that was, like, right around the time 3rd edition was coming out, so I kind of missed out on all the 3 and 3.5 and Pathfinder stuff. Kind of skipped over that entirely, and there is kind of a gap in my like knowledge of that little era of gaming history and what was going on. It does appear that like during that time, like the gaming culture nearly died out. Seemed to have been just like eaten up by all the MMORPG stuff coming out from video games, and games like Elder Scrolls and other ways that you can very much satisfactorily scratch that itch for a little RPG action in your home without having to deal with all the controversies and drama of other people. But even since being back, like even online, even before 2016 and the Great Meme War, and when fandom started like ripping itself into twain around the time of Star Wars: The Last Jedi, but also there's definitely like there's already rumblings within the Star Trek community because of J.J. Abrams, who I ultimately blame for a lot of that stuff in the film industry. And like in some real loose kind of ways, you can kind of backtrace, J.J. Abrams to Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast and D&D, and kind of like a 7 Degrees of Kevin Bacon kind of way. Not that he's had like any direct influence, but all part of the same kind of common culture. So shall we say, like these are the people that like Hasbro picks. Who are we gonna have? Make a big Transformers movie and sell some Transformers. Well, how about one of J.J. Abrams' underlings, and then later on we'll have him make Star Trek. Because that's where we are at science fiction. You want that highbrow, thoughtful science fiction to give humanity, like an image of a noble future to work towards. You hire one of the guys who wrote Star Trek 2009, or that Tom Cruise Mummy movie. Quality hits like that. That's the zeitgeist. That's not really where we are, but that's what they think of us. The thing is like, the reputation of nerds and geeks as being like a bunch of like geniuses in their basements, like, working on computers and stuff. Those are old stereotypes. And even back then, they weren't really believed in some ways. Like, they think we're dumb. We might arguably be dumb. There is a Lost Boys quality to a lot of us, myself very much included. And the fact that, like, we all, like, took too much, maybe, to the media that we saw as children that was full of all sorts of messages about, like, not letting go of your imagination, and adults equal bad, and, you got to hold on to your childhood, and that kind of Peter Pan kind of mentality. It's been very much, like, with us, at least since Generation X onward. Basically, everyone taught by Jim Henson, so to say, to read and talk. as little kids watching PBS, Sesame Street. Um, uh, I started this channel because, you know, like I felt like there's this rare window of opportunity to do something I always had wanted to do, which was, you know, write tabletop RPGs. I mean, obviously I could have been doing this whole time, but there's never like a thought in my head that there's ever going to be a period of time where it might even be at all remotely commercially viable to do so. I mean, sure, I could like have a blog and post a bunch of stuff there on some message board back in like 2003, but like, you know, that's not the same thing. For some reason, people take what you have to say way much more seriously if you make them pay for it. I mean, there's like pretty much any of my games, if I just had these as like a free blog and was just posting on Twitter saying, hey, read this, no one would look at it. But put it on Drive-Thru RPG, $12.99 on it, and suddenly it's an object of interest. It's a weird bit of human psychology. It's in large part why you know, therapists and life coaches and such do like charge people money. It's not just a scam to make money off people by giving them advice that by all rights the person should be able to see on their own. It's because, you know, the person will take it more seriously if they've invested in it than they would if they were just getting free advice from a friend at a bar, kind of a thing. And, you know, and this channel is to, you know, grow an audience that would suit the kind of books that I write. Do I put out 100% tabletop role-playing game content? No, probably more like 85 to 90%. Obviously, I will stray off into a variety of topics. I do try to wed my videos back to role-playing games somehow. But that's, you know, not always possible. There's all sorts of subjects that I decide not to talk about, even if I have, like, you know, strong thoughts about, like, no, I could say that or say that. But it's like, is that really going to make for a productive YouTube video? But, I don't know, like, I've been noticing more arguments in the comment sections between viewers over the last few days. God forbid, you know, like, non-parents ever express opinions about parents. It's funny, like, the amount of people complaining about, like, how, like, you can't believe you would. I agree with everything you said, but how dare you talk about parenthood if you're not a parent? Okay, like, take that sentence, move the period way back to just, I agree with everything you said, end of statement. Human beings are allowed to have opinions on any fucking thing we want. You can listen to or ignore other people's opinions as much as you want. That kind of thinking is the exact same kind of thinking that a fair portion of you absolutely can't stand when someone says that you can't understand something because you're not that thing. And then as soon as it's turned against you, suddenly like, well, you can't understand me because you're not like me. You know, can't have it both ways, you know, kind of a thing when it comes to that kind of stuff. But, you know, much akin to the idea that humans shouldn't be judgmental. In order for us to be able to navigate the universe, we have to be able to make quick judgments and assessments and make choices. That's the whole basis of making a choice, is making a judgment upon multiple options and deciding which one you feel is optimal for whatever your personal agenda or goal is. Who knows anymore? Whatever. The thing is whether or not you have kids, we've all been kids. We've all been witness to parenting, whether or not we ourselves have been the parent. Not just how our own parents have parented us, but we also got to witness the parenting of our friends and how their parents treated them. We've all have had plenty of opportunities to absorb information about that particular phenomenon. What is extremely ironic, though, about all the fervor over that aspect of that video is that there's at least twice I very plainly said that from a parenting point of view alone, the fellow who had left that comment did the right thing. So that's me criticizing his parenting? No, if I was criticizing anything, I was criticizing his dungeon mastery, which is like a whole other argument, and is also something that is like, you know, how dare you criticize someone that's hypocritical? Sure. At least that would like be an accurate reaction to what I had said. Instead, you get this weird defensive kind of posturing from some people of like, well, you don't. Yeah, I don't know. Where do you try to hide behind your walls? I don't know. Anyway, leave comments, hit buttons, stay waspinated.